People born in the 1700s all took their first breath in a world of candlelight, horse-drawn wagons, and the silence of the pre-industrial age. They lived in a time before the United States was a nation, before the French Revolution shook Europe, and long before the word photograph even existed. When these men and women were children, the only sounds they would hear were of nature and the rhythmic clatter of the loom. They saw the birth of the modern world from the front row. They were the last of the old world. Born into a life that had remained unchanged for 1,000 years, they lived to see it vanish forever, and in the span of a single lifetime, the world they knew was torn down and rebuilt in iron. Then, in the twilight of their lives, science did the impossible. It captured light. In the 1840s and 50s, these survivors of a bygone century sat in brand new photographic studios in stiff silence, held still by iron braces, forced to endure minutes of exposure just to leave us this single flickering proof of their existence. They didn't smile in front of the lens like we do today, because to them, this was a solemn gravity, a final testimony to be passed down to generations they would never actually meet. We call them the oldest born generation, the only souls from the 1700s who ever found a way to look back at us from across the veil of time. Welcome to Animata Historia, breathing life into historic photographs from around the world to remind us of how we used to live, where we came from, and what made us who we are today. In this episode, we are using AI software to reanimate the oldest generation ever photographed. Isn't it fascinating to consider how people living in the 1700s bore witness to the very last years of an ancient way of life that stayed largely unchanged for centuries? A simpler, more natural existence which came to an abrupt end in the 19th century, with the sudden rise of industrialization and the birth of the modern world. The generation we are bringing to life in this video all lived in a time before electricity, before cars, before recorded music, and before the constant noise we now take for granted. Their world was quieter. No engines, no radios, no hum of machines. Only voices, wind, animals, and hand-worked tools. They moved at walking speed or by horse, rarely traveling far from home. News arrived slowly, if it arrived at all. Nightfall meant darkness, not streetlights, and music was something you made yourself, not something that played in the background. Within a single lifetime, that silence would begin to disappear.
Take a walk down to the beach a little later if you like.
These are the faces of people who lived at the turning point, born into a new age of technology and innovation, which far surpassed anything their generation could ever have imagined possible. The Fayum portraits. Before we turn our attention to the oldest people ever photographed, I want to take a slight U-turn for a moment. The remarkable photographic portraits of men and women born in the 1700s reveal not only the oldest, but the first humans in history to have their true likenesses captured on film. This made me wonder, how far back in history do we have to go to find the first real faces captured in paint? And here they are, the Fayum portraits, a set of stunning paintings which date back over 2,000 years. The Fayum portraits stand at a singular moment in human history. They are the first naturalistic portraits ever found, the earliest surviving images in which real people are depicted as they truly looked. Created in Roman Egypt between the 1st century BCE and the 3rd century CE, these portraits were painted on wooden panels and placed over the faces of mummies. They emerged from the Fayum oasis, west of the Nile, where the dry desert climate preserved what time almost always destroys. Because of this accident of geography, the Fayum portraits survive, while countless earlier paintings have vanished. What makes them extraordinary is their naturalism. For the first time in surviving art, we see individuals rendered with convincing realism. Nuanced skin tones, shadows around the eyes, subtle expressions, even hints of personality. These are not idealized faces meant to symbolize power, divinity, or eternity. They are portraits of people, men, women, and children, painted as they lived, aged, and were remembered. Like this portrait of a woman called Aline, who lived in Roman Egypt and died around 24 CE. Her name and age were recorded on her burial, making this one of the few mummy portraits linked to a known individual. She was buried in the Egyptian tradition, while her portrait reflects Greek and Roman artistic styles. First encountered by Europeans in 1615 through the Italian traveler Pietro della Valle, these works were later recognized as something unprecedented, not just ancient artifacts, but the ancestors of portraiture itself. Today, more than 1,000 Fayum portraits exist in museums and collections across the world, each one preserving a human presence from nearly 2 millennia ago. To stand before a Fayum portrait is to meet the gaze of the past without mediation or myth. They are the first naturalistic portraits ever found, and the oldest surviving proof that humans once sought, not just to be immortal, but to be seen. The oldest generation captured in light. There continues to be some debate surrounding the oldest born people ever photographed, partly due to unverified birth dates and proof of identity. But the 5 extraordinary portraits you are about to see are both authentic and verified. This is Hannah Stille Gorby. Born in 1746, she is believed to be the oldest woman ever photographed. When this portrait was taken around 1840, she had already lived through a century of change, wars, revolutions, and generations passing. Her image is not a reconstruction or a memory, but a direct encounter with a woman born in the 18th century, looking back at us from the dawn of photography. This is Ezra Green, born in the same year as Hannah Stille Gorby in 1746. He served as a surgeon's mate during the American Revolution, caring for wounded soldiers and sailors in some of the war's harshest conditions. This image was taken in the mid-1840s, late in his life, after he had witnessed the founding of the United States and a century of change. Conrad Heyer, born in 1749, served as a soldier in the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War under the overall command of George Washington. After the war, he returned to civilian life and lived until he was 107 years old. These early photographs were taken in the early 1850s, near the end of a life that began in colonial America. Heyer was born in 18th century New York when it was still a British colony under King George II. The city's population was around 18,000 and confined mostly to lower Manhattan, where life was shaped by hard labor and disease, and 1 in 5 people were slaves. American independence was still decades away. This was the colonial world he entered, long before the nation he would later fight for even existed. This rare daguerreotype of Captain George Fishley of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, was taken in 1850, the year he died at age 90. Born in 1753, he is one of the few verified Revolutionary War veterans ever photographed, offering a direct link to the 18th century. Fishley was famously known in his hometown as the last of our cocked hats, because he continued to wear his original, old-fashioned Revolutionary War hat in parades well into the mid-19th century, long after the style had been replaced by the top hat and bicorn. In 1826, Fishley famously refused to ride with a man he believed had been a mercenary for the British, and when asked to participate in a procession honoring the late John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, Fischley said,
"What? He a patriot? Why, he was a damned Hessian, and came over here to fight us for 6 pence a day. No, sir, I don't ride with such patriots as he."
Lemuel Cook, born in 1759, also served as a soldier and is widely accepted by historians as the last surviving veteran of the American Revolutionary War. He lived a long life afterward and died in 1866, the year after the Civil War finally reached its conclusion. This image was taken in the 1860s, near the end of his life, after he had outlived an entire generation and witnessed the United States grow from a group of colonies into an entire nation. All of the following portraits remain anonymous and untitled. All we know of these remarkable daguerreotypes is that they all have one thing in common. They all reveal the faces of real people, born in the 1700s. By the 1850s, photography had become just accessible enough to reach beyond the wealthy and the famous. Across the United States, cameras began to capture something rare. People born in the 18th century, still alive, still present. Most of these portraits were made in small towns rather than great cities. They were taken in modest studios, borrowed rooms, or temporary setups near windows where daylight was strongest. The technology was simple, the process slow, and the moment carefully arranged. The people in these images were not elites. They were farmers, laborers, widows, sailors, and tradespeople, ordinary individuals whose lives would normally have left no visual trace. What set them apart was not wealth or status, but age. They had lived long enough to become living links to a vanishing world. A world that we can only picture in our imaginations, a time so far removed from the one we currently occupy that it seems almost impossible to comprehend fully. In an era before electricity, machinery, photography, and even recorded music, the world not only looked different from today, but sounded different. It's genuinely hard to picture a world with no artificial sounds or noises at all. No alarm clock to wake you up for work, no television to curl up in front of on an evening, and no music to fill those moments of silence which some of us have become so accustomed to avoiding. For the older viewers among you, I'm sure the idea of peace and quiet is always an attractive proposition. But who doesn't love to listen to a bit of relaxing music at some point in the day? When these elderly sitters appear well-dressed, it can be misleading. They wore their best clothing, often the single outfit reserved for church or special occasions. Coats might be decades old, carefully mended and preserved. Shawls, bonnets, and formal collars were arranged with care and were meant to display dignity, not wealth. Many of these garments were rooted in older styles. The clothing itself often belonged to an earlier era, worn not as costume, but as continuity, people dressing as they always had, even as the world around them changed. These photographs were rarely commissioned by the elderly subjects alone. More often, the cost was covered by family members, children or grandchildren, who understood that this might be the last chance to preserve a likeness. Sometimes entire families contributed small amounts to make it possible. In other cases, the community played a role. Extreme old age carried meaning in the 19th century. A person who had lived through the colonial era or the revolutionary period was seen as a witness to history, and towns sometimes encouraged photographers to document them. Photographers themselves also had reasons to make these images. A portrait of someone born in the 1700s was unusual, even marketable. Such photographs might be displayed in studio windows, shown to visitors, or used to attract attention. Because of this, sittings were sometimes discounted or offered freely. For the sitter, the experience was often quiet and quite physical. They were seated carefully, supported if needed, and asked to remain still. There was no performance, only patience. Many of these faces show calm, fatigue, or simple endurance rather than expression. What we are seeing collectively is not a gallery of the powerful, but a record of survival. These images exist because photography arrived just in time, and because families, communities, and photographers recognized that something was about to be lost.